Hello, and welcome to another episode of Recovery Stories Have Power. My name is Oliver Books. On this episode, I had the pleasure of chatting with Mark Rosman, a film and television industry veteran with a career spanning 3 decades. From directing for Disney, Lifetime, and Hallmark to teaching at UCLA Film School, Mark opens up about the intersection of his personal life and professional work. He shares insights into his latest project, Keep Coming Back, a deeply personal film inspired by his journey to becoming a supportive ally for a family member with substance use disorder. This conversation highlights the healing power of storytelling and the importance of compassion in recovery. Learn more about Mark's upcoming film at keepcomingbackfilm.com. And hey, while you're out there surfing the web, we would really appreciate a like, share, subscribe, and review on your favorite podcasting platform. And hey, I won't keep you in suspense. Here's my conversation with Mark Rosman. Hello and welcome to Recovery Stories Have Power. My name is Oliver Books. Today I am joined by Mark Rosman. Mark, how are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being on the pod. Can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself? Who you are, maybe what you do?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I've been a filmmaker for over 30 years now. I've been writing and directing all sorts of movies, feature films, TV movies, episodic TV. My main focus has really been family movies. I directed a Cinderella story with Hilary Duff, and that was released by Warner Brothers back in the early 2000s. And a Life Size with Tyra Banks and Lindsay Lohan, and The Perfect Man with Hilary Duff again, and also the Lizzie McGuire TV show. I was one of the directors on that, and Even Stevens. So as you can see, kind of a lot of family kind of movies. I've done films for Lifetime and Hallmark, and continue to do that while I'm also now a professor at UCLA Film School in Los Angeles. And just very, very busy, still developing my own projects, which we'll have a chance to talk about later.
Absolutely. And might I say, as right smack dab in the middle of the millennial age group, my younger sister is a big fan of your work. So
yeah, there's I tend to get that a lot from women of a certain age who I made a lot of films from their childhood.
Yeah, very much so. So that's really amazing. So being in sort of a family-focused career path film, in the films that you make are family-focused. Tell me about your family. Tell me about your background.
Yeah, well, I grew up in LA, and had a very happy childhood, and went to school for a couple of years at UCLA. Then I ended up going to NYU and studying film there. I have a brother and sister, and nobody is in the entertainment industry in my family at all. So I was kind of a black sheep in that regard. And my first film coming out of school was a horror film, actually, called The House on Sorority Row. And from horror, I ended up at Disney somehow. But yeah, we have a very tight family. We all, my parents have passed, but my brother and sister and their families, well, some of their families live in Los Angeles. I think one of the maybe remarkable things about our family is that we weren't really touched by addiction at all. And so that's why, when my daughter was a teenager around 2012, 13, in that time period, and I was in the middle of making all these family films, these Disney movies, I ended up being very blindsided when we found out that we had an issue in our own family. And so that's kind of what got me on this journey.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think we can just jump kind of into it. You're working on a film called Keep Coming Back right now, that's loosely based off of your journey through this. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What happened was that my wife and I discovered that our daughter, who was then a teenager, was, doing a lot of drugs and kind of spiraling down that path. And we somebody had suggested that we take her to see a therapist who kind of specializes in teens and addiction, and we did. And he met with her for a few minutes in his office here in LA, and then sent her out of the office and said, "Hey, Mark and Linda, why don't you come and just chat, catch up?" And we went in and we met him, and he proceeded to tell us, that she was doing drugs like almost every day, and it was a real big problem, and that we needed to act on it right away. And so we did what, every loving, smart, caring, empathetic parents would do. We denied it, and that's what you do. We said, no, not our kid. She's
Right.
exaggerating, to be cool or something. And so we, and certainly I, had a lot of denial going on in that first stage, and that's very common. I've come to understand, and but after a little while, we did finally send her to an addiction treatment center, and that was really kind of the where I put sort of the beginning of my journey at that point, where we finally acknowledged that something very serious was going on, and we needed to deal with that.
Sure. Was there a white light or some sort of revelatory moment in which you realized that like this is a real thing or something that kind of pulled the wool from your eyes? Was it a moment? Was it a series of events?
Yeah, I think we, after that meeting with that therapist, we had decided that, a good place for her to finish out her high school would be a school in Arizona, in Sedona, Arizona. And after a few months there, we got a phone call that she had downed something she shouldn't have. And it was kind of that moment, I think, for both of us that we realized this is more serious than we've been thinking, and she and we have to deal with this. And so that was kind of the moment that happened. But even from that point, and we sent her to a treatment center, we were still at like, okay, 30 days at this place and she'll be all fixed, so to speak,
Right.
and she'll go right back and finish up school and everything will proceed along. And it doesn't work that way. And, I would always ask myself at that point, the beginning of the process, are we at the beginning of the end or the beginning of the beginning? And it really turned out we were at the beginning of the beginning, and we had a process to go through, and that was the start of where my wife and I started to go to Al-Anon meetings. We also got involved in a parent support group at a treatment center here in LA, called Visions, which is great, and focuses on adolescent treatment. And it was really through that group that we built these really tight connections with other parents who were going through this. And that was so important to us. And probably the number one thing I would say for anybody, experiencing this is get support. And by that, I mean, there are support groups. Al-Anon is very prevalent, and there are other modalities like craft, and there's an organization called PAL, Parents of Addicted Loved Ones. It's great, and they run support groups all over the nation. Al-Anon's all over the nation. Craft, all these places. So there's a lot out there, and that was one of the first things we did. Was we, luckily for us, we weren't shy about it. We talked to people about it, and a lot of people don't do that. They are, concerned about the stigma. What'll people think? And sure, it's out there, and people say the darndest things when you tell them what you're going through. Although I'd say over half the time you tell somebody what you're going through, it turns out they say, "Oh God, you know what? My kid, my sibling, my parents, my aunt, my whatever has been going through this." It's amazing how prevalent this disease is. So talking to people about it was very good because we got a lot of support that way.
Absolutely. I think just being working in this field, you hear a lot that the opposite of addiction is connection. It's not
Right.
necessarily sobriety; it's connection, and to hear that from an ally's perspective as well, where the thing that brought you into sort of a healthy perspective being those connections. While you were talking, I was curious, what was it like going from a household or a childhood? You kind of said your whole life you dodged sort of this substance use thing. What was that transition like into learning about it from an ally's perspective, becoming an advocate yourself?
Well, I mean, that was a journey in and of itself at the beginning. It was really shocking to be there for me because I didn't experience anything. I mean, to me, those words addict and heavy drug use and abuse and all that stuff. I mean, I went to my first Al-Anon meeting, and this was early on. Um, we had heard from this support group that we had at Visions. You got to try out Al-Anon. So we went to the local meeting, and it was filled with, or my strong memory of it is that the people who shared were talking. We were older people, and they were talking about their kids who were in their 40s still going through this. And that was so frightening to us and to me. And I walked out of there going, wait a minute, this is not my kid. This is not going to be us. This isn't us. It's just this is very different from us. And in a way, I think I was both right and wrong about that. It's sort of a mix of that. But it was hard. I mean, that's how shocking it was to us to hear this kind of stuff because we didn't have this. We didn't experience this, neither of us, my wife nor I, growing up. So we didn't have that. All we had to reference was, TV shows and movies, basically. Um, so it was an education where we started from, ground zero. Or I was, I'll just speak for myself, ignorant of what this disease is like and uh, how many people go through this and the similarities. I mean, that's the other thing when you go into a support group, whether it's Al-Anon or any of these support groups, and you start to hear the stories from other parents. What's remarkable is how similar they are to what you've gone through and what we've gone through. And that is, in a way, comforting and a big realization that you're not alone. And what you're going through, other people are experiencing this and other people are getting help and are growing and finding solutions and finding help. And so that in a way is comforting, and it tells you that, oh, that thing that's been happening with us or that our daughter did or whatever, wow, other people are experiencing that same thing. So that was kind of the beginning of my education in recovery. And I did what they say at the end of Al-Anon meetings or whenever a new member shares, they say, keep coming back. And that's the name of my movie. And I'll get to that in a minute. Um, but that's very powerful. Those three words, it's, they follow that up with, it works if you work it, meaning, you gotta kind of work at it. You can just go and sit there, but it's good to do some other things, and share your own experiences, and follow up with people. And there's lots of things you can do. But that was the beginning for us, and that was this shift from being sort of a complete outsider, civilian, maybe you would call it, to the beginning of being, you know, immersed in this. And, listen, regardless of whether we went to group or not, we were immersed in it just from the roller coaster ride we were going on with our daughter. So we were already there, but now we added this whole component of the support and the help, and that was key.
Absolutely, absolutely. So moving into it,
Wanting to make a film about this and what the film is even about. I think in this world of recovery, they talk a lot about the quote unquote addict or the substance use disorder, the person struggling with that, hitting their emotional bottom. And there was a point where I hit my emotional bottom, and I was in a yet another parent workshop that was given, presented by one of a treatment center that we were working with. And, this was like the third or fourth workshop. We had been in this struggle with our daughter, and I had felt completely hopeless, defeated, didn't think anything was working. And we sat down for our first little group meeting of parents, and the therapist had everybody go around and say, where are you at? Let's just check in with everybody. And when it got to me, I was just really honest. And I just said, you know what? I don't want to be here. This is like, I've done this a couple times. Nothing's working. My daughter's in a bad place. I'm right there with her in a really bad place. And what's the point? I had like given up, and I was here admitting that and putting that out into the world. And once I did that, I started, I don't know, somehow that unburdened me in a way. And I started to absorb what I was hearing from other parents and from therapists in a little different way. And what happened was I had been hearing a phrase in a lot of groups of people saying, parents have to take care of themselves. And I always took that to mean, and a lot of parents would follow that up with, you got to like get a hobby or go to the spa and relax, hang out with your friends, that kind of self-care. And that wasn't, to me, that wasn't helpful. It's not what I was really responding to. But then at this workshop, what really clicked for me was what that really meant for me, which was, wait a minute, I have to take care of my own feelings. And what I realized is that I wasn't putting my feelings first. I was putting my daughter's feelings, or what I thought was my daughter's feelings, first. I was so focused on how is she going to react? What is she going to do? And I was afraid of kind of looking at my own feelings, because, I was worried that I would lose her love and that I wouldn't have a daughter anymore if I either set really firm boundaries and kept to them, or did something that was just going to completely send her off on a bad path. So I realized, though, wait a second, I don't have to be in the same roller coaster as she is. I can step off and I can be in my own life. She can do her thing, and no matter what, up or down, that's fine. I don't have to go up and down. I am a separate person, and I have my own feelings, and I need to acknowledge those and honor them and value them and say, wait a second, this isn't feeling right. You know what? No, I'm not going to do that. It doesn't feel right to me. And when I realized that, that's when I got on this path that really led to much more serenity and calm for me. And what happened was, I think my daughter ended up respecting me more rather than less. And I started to be able to set boundaries, which I had a hard time doing, and holding them. And by doing them and feeling like really my first attention is going to be on my own feelings, that really served to calm me down. And I felt like I had a path forward. And my wife was doing the same work at the same time, dealing with other things. She didn't have the same reactions as me, but she dealt with some other things. And what happened was when we started to change, both my wife and I, um, that opened up a space for my daughter to start to recover, because no longer was I being squishy with boundaries or my wife, overly engaging with her. We were doing something that this initial therapist, Garth Lemaster, who had seen our daughter initially, and I spoke about that, he kept saying this thing that was so important. Parents have to take care of their side of the street. And when they take care of their side of the street, then that can open a door for their loved one to work on their side of the street. And that's what we did. And I think it contributed. It wasn't the sole reason why our daughter is doing so well right now, but it certainly contributed to leading her there. And right now, my daughter's 27. She's thriving. She's 5 years substance free. She just got married like 6 weeks ago. Beautiful ceremony. She's just doing great. And so what happened now, this leads to the film. So here I am, a filmmaker, going, I know I want to make a movie about what we went through. But at first, I was sort of dealing typically with stories about characters based on her, essentially, the addicts, quote unquote, the one struggling with substance use disorder, because they've got a very dramatic, um, story to tell. And they're kind of, interesting to watch. And that's why almost every film about addiction centers on the one that's struggling. And so I came up with some ideas about it, but I realized, God, there's just been so many movies about this, and some of them are really good, some are not so good, but I didn't have anything to add to it. It just would have been another story of, seeing the ups and downs of somebody's addiction struggle. But then it hit me that what my wife and I went through is actually, first of all, unique to addiction films, to focus on not on the addict, but on the parents in this case. But really, it's about any caregiver who's got a loved one who's going through this struggle. And that what we went through was so important, and such a important and critical piece to this family disease. And I realized that would make a really interesting film, and nobody's done that before, and it would be very helpful, because there's so many parents out there who feel like their whole focus, just like we were, our whole focus was on our daughter, and the qualifier that she was the one with all the problems and we were fine. And it's like, okay, so what do we do to fix her? And that is, something that doesn't quite work that well. There is a component. Obviously, you need some of that, but there's a saying: put down the microscope and pick up the mirror. Look at yourself, take care of yourself, and when you do that, you then stop doing behaviors that, even though well-intentioned, might be contributing to the problem. So that led me to write this script. And it's about, where the focus of the script is it's about a widowed father. I made him widowed because I wanted the main character, it just to be their struggle. I wanted them to just go through this arc. When you get parents as the two main characters, you end up getting this sort of they're kind of battling over how to deal with the situation often. And I wanted to follow one main character, so I made him a widower. He's in his mid 40s. He's a director in LA, and he's got a 17-year-old daughter that he finds out is seriously abusing drugs, sends her to a rehab in Utah in beautiful mountains. It's patterned after a rehab named Cirque Lodge that's gorgeous in the Sundance Mountains. And but he gets a call like the next day from the treatment center saying, "Hey, we noticed you didn't sign up for the parent workshop." And he's like, "What do you mean? I'm too busy. And by the way, isn't it your job to fix her? Why do you need me over there?" And they say, "Well, it doesn't quite work that way. We believe in family involvement, and one parent has to show, we require one parent to come to this 4-day workshop." At first, he kind of refuses, but he realizes they're just going to send her back to him. So he's going to go for just like a couple days and then come right back. And most of the movie happens there, where he ends up joining a parent workshop that's run by this very dynamic woman in her 60s. And if Jamie Lee Curtis is listening, this is a great part for you. And it's a woman who is in recovery and who's been through it with her own son, and she gets every parent's number. She knows how they're trying to deny things and all that. And it's sort of a battle of wills between our guy, his name is Miles in the movie, who feels and says that, we're all great parents. What are we even doing here? And this woman, whose character's name is Gillian, who says, well, that's what we're going to find out. And what she ends up sort of teaching them and bringing them through all these experiences. They don't just sit around in a room talk. They do things. In fact, there's a sequence where she teams each parent with a barnyard animal, which is something I did at one of these workshops. And the whole idea is you've got to communicate to this animal and get them from point A to point B without a leash or a collar or anything. You've just got to somehow communicate. And it's all, obviously teaching you communication skills with a being that is only motivated by substances. In this case, it's hay. And you don't have any hay to give them. So, which is also to say that this movie, although very dramatic and very powerful, is also has humor in it, because we found a lot of humor going through this, and it's hard not to sometimes laugh at ourselves when we're going through this. And humor, I find, is a great way to also help get a message across, because it's not just like, oh God, the darkness. There's a lot of hope in this movie, and the movie ends with a lot of hope and a very important message, which is parents have to look at their own behavior and change. And when they do that, that can really be an opening for recovery.
That's beautiful. That's a wonderful direction. I do appreciate that substance abuse has such a wide radius of effect, and you're right. It seems like in pop culture we focus so much on the person who is using substances
Mm-hmm.
versus the people in that sphere. Within the scope of the film, I noticed on your website you have consulting producers and social impact
Yeah.
producers that I, as someone who is in recovery myself and has gone through 12-step programs and been in that community for about 10 years now, I noticed that there's a lot of misrepresentation perhaps, or misconceptions of what some of those places of growth look like. I just I appreciate that you're taking the time to speak this story from your personal experience, and have folks on your team who are consulting about what this should look like in a way that is, for lack of a better term, maybe socially responsible.
Mm-hmm.
So my question, I guess, is, uh, What are some of your priorities in terms of what you want this to communicate from maybe an advocacy perspective or
Hmm.
from an audience growth perspective?
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks for noticing that we've put together a really great team that's both as consultants and some filmmakers that are involved as well. On the consultant side, we brought on a man who was really critical in helping us when we were going through this with our daughter. His name's Sam Dresser, and he's with a company that he founded called Clear Consulting, CLERE. And we we brought him on as an addiction consultant for our family when our daughter was really going through this. And this is another thing I would suggest to parents, if they have the wherewithal to do that. Um, you need someone to help you navigate. Even if you have a child who is struggling and wants to go to therapy, let's say they're willing, let's just say, where do you send them? And how do you just Google search, and if you do that, you'll just be flooded. So how do you know where to go? And so Sam was so instrumental in, because he met several times, in fact, had a really good relationship with our daughter and with us, and was able to navigate and tell us, here are a couple places that I think would be a really good fit for your daughter. And in fact, also, here are the case managers at those places that would be a good fit for her. And that helps so much. And so when I finished the script, I one of the first people I sent it to was Sam Dresser, and he loved it. And I asked him, would he, come on board as a consulting producer, be on our advisory board? And he said, absolutely. And he's been a huge supporter, as have his whole company, Clear Consulting. Um, and Garth Lemaster from Visions is on our board, and he's been great. And they both read the script, and making sure, wanted to really make sure the languaging is right, and that's really important nowadays. I really hesitate to say the word addict anymore because it's become kind of a very negative sort of word, or a word that's charged, I should say, with
Right.
a lot of meaning. And I've come to really realize that there are different modalities out there, that not everybody loves Al-Anon like the way I did. And Al-Anon works really well for some people, and for some people it's not the right fit. And CRAFT, which is CRAFT, they initials that stand for, I forgot what they actually stand for, but they have a kind of a different modality, and that can be really helpful for people. And so in going through the process of both writing the script and then launching the movie, which in this case means fundraising and bringing people on board, I've learned so much, and I've met so many interesting people, and really who have taught me a lot about this. And I did want to mention that films like this, which are relatively small dramas, are not really being funded by the kinds of places I make my movies for, like Warner Brothers, Universal, Disney. Generally, those companies these days are financing more action films, thrillers, big pre-sold titles, stuff with big stars. When you're dealing with a small drama, you generally have to raise the money independently, which is what we're doing. And it's a $2 million film. And fortunately, we have already raised half of that. We're at just under $1 million raised. And also, luckily for us, because we're dealing with a subject matter that has a real social value to the world, we have what's called a fiscal sponsor who has the 501(c)(3), which is the tax designation that like churches or any nonprofit has. So they have that. We applied to be in their program. And so now anybody who donates to us gets a full charitable tax deduction, which is great. for our donors. And then also we have room for investors too, because we think this film will do well, and we have a really good program for investors. And so we have that as well. So we're kind of out there, trying to get support for this film. I'd love for your audience to check us out on our website. We have a crowdfunding campaign that's going on right now that's doing fantastic, and I'll share those links with you, Oliver, and you can share it with your audience. The name of the website is just really simple. It's keepcomingbackfilm.com. And you can really check out, all the different aspects of the film there.
That's fantastic. And yes, I was absolutely going to ask about your crowdfunding resources. That feels like a really great way to involve the community in this film that is about community and about connection. I think that's wonderful. So yes, check the description boxes, and we'll share that link absolutely everywhere once this episode goes live. So I just have a couple more questions for you as we kind of start to approach time. So Faces and Voices of Recovery is primarily an advocacy organization. And I'm curious, you having gone through it, not recently, but within the last 10 years, what kind of recovery resources were available to you and your family that really helped you, maybe outside of the scope of 28-day treatments? We work a lot with recovery community organizations. That's kind of one of our focus areas. And so what was available to you that really helped, that maybe you can share with our audience that to give them some encouragement?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I would say that a long-term treatment facility for our daughter worked really well. So longer than 30 days. 30 days doesn't really do all that much. It's helpful, but that's just a very short amount of time. So, something that's more like 90 days, 6 months, even longer, 8, 9 months, is a much better length to really get into things. And so was for our daughter, very helpful. For us, it was, these parent support groups, and we went to two different types. Al-Anon is sort of self or peer run. There's no therapist there or anything. But we also went to this other parent support group where it was run by the therapist that was part of Visions, the treatment center in LA. That was really helpful. The parent workshops we did, as I mentioned, those were really helpful. Bringing in an addiction consultant, we found very helpful. We also read books, about it. And The Parallel Process is one book we liked quite a bit. We would go to talks. Sometimes Al-Anon would have these big events where some people with some really long-term recovery, and I'm talking about parents, would come and speak to groups of people, and big gatherings. And so we found that really helpful. There's a lot out there these days, and the stigma is really diminishing at this point. And so I just encourage parents to seek out help. We also had our own therapist, my wife and I. I mean, we're believers in individual therapy, and we continued that. That was a help. So there's a lot out there. And those were the things that really helped us a lot.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, Mark, I think as we're kind of approaching time, we always end our podcast with this one question, and that is, generally, what's one piece of advice you can give to our audience that has helped you in your life?
Well, hopefully through this podcast, I've given a lot of things that helped us. I would say, you know, well, two sayings that are ring really true for me. One is the one I said already, which is take care of your own side of the street. Hugely important because you can have your loved one go to all this treatment and even get better, but if they return into the same family system that they left, most likely you're going to get back into the same problem. You have to shift in the family. So that's number one. Number two, there was another therapist named Mike Gurr who told us that, you know, parents can be the biggest part of the problem or the biggest part of the solution. And I think that's really the case. And so we, we were part of the problem in the beginning. And we ended up, I think, being part of the solution. By how did we do that? By looking at ourselves, which is, seems counterproductive. Why aren't you just focusing on fixing her? But, you can only control what's in your own hula hoop. You put a hula hoop around you and that's it. It's you. So it works really well to focus on yourself and make sure that you're honoring your feelings and you're setting boundaries and you're getting support, and you're looking at your behavior and seeing what you can do to take care of your side of the street. So that's it.
Beautiful. Well, Mark, thank you so much for coming on the pod. Please check out keepcomingbackfilm.com. So excited to see where this goes.
Thank you
to
for
Mark Rosman for joining us on today's
I really
podcast.
enjoyed talking to you.
Again, if you would like to learn more about his upcoming film, Keep Coming Back, check out keepcomingbackfilm.com. Don't forget to give us a like, share, or subscribe on whichever podcast platform you're using, and a review really does help us out. This show is produced and engineered by me, Oliver Books, co-produced by our wonderful staff here at Faces and Voices of Recovery. The music you are listening to right now and at the beginning of the episode is courtesy of our friend Chris Tate and his band Bel Ghoul. Big shout out to the awesome folks at his RCO, Passenger Recovery in Michigan. If you have questions or feedback, or just know someone who would be great on the show, send us an email. That's podcast@facesandvoicesofrecovery.org. As always, thank you so much for listening, and we can't wait to see you next time. See ya.